Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon.
How's his volume? We gotta make sure he has enough volume.
Hi, Marwan. I just want to hear your voice so I
Good
can
morning.
make sure. Good morning. Wherever you're part of the world you're watching from, whether you're watching live or recorded world, this is Marwan Abdelhamid. I'm very honored and happy to have you today. This is going to be a very interesting conversation / interview regarding your country of origin. So today, my guest is a young 20-year-old from Palestine living in the United States, student of international studies at the University of Santa Barbara, of Palestinian, but of a French / Algerian mother. Is this correct?
Yes.
And a Palestinian father, and some
Serbian.
Serbian descent as well. But I'm gonna let you speak. So, Marwan, who are you?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on. This is great, and thank you for amplifying Palestinian voices. I think right now, this is truly what's needed. So I really appreciate you taking the time and reaching out. I'm Marwan Abdelhamid. So as you said, 20 years old, living in the States. I was born in Jerusalem, raised in Gaza, raised in the Gaza Strip. I lived there for 7 years, and we left to Jordan when I was 7 years old, and I grew up there and then came to the States to pursue higher education. My mother, as you said, French Algerian. My father, Serbian Palestinian. So genetically, I'm only 1/4 Palestinian, actually. From it's my father's father. He's fully Palestinian from Safad, which is a village in the north that was ethnically cleansed of its Palestinian population in 1948. And yeah, I'm a 20-year-old artist, content creator, whatever you want to call me.
And you are also you have a startup with a partner called Grow Home, which I think is a very interesting entrepreneurship. Not only I think for your home country, but also I believe for other countries. I'm Greek, so it's we kind of have something in common. There's people living in our home country, but the diaspora is huge, and this is why we need
Hold
to.
on, the Instagram seems to have paused.
Okay, all right, yeah, I can see that we're frozen on Instagram, so we're gonna try and fix that. I just want to start with yeah. I just want to make sure we're still. Why is Instagram frozen?
Yeah, I don't understand.
We're gonna cut this for the final.
No worries.
Don't worry. We will not be. Well, you don't have to say things again, and we don't have to have those technical glitches in the final.
Yeah, well, I just don't understand why.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Still going out.
I know.
Oh, it's
but,
like frozen here.
huh.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
So what happens when it pauses on Instagram?
Well, I have to restart it here. That's it. But it's okay. It's going now. I guess
Yeah,
it'll go back. I'm sure.
It'll freeze again. See, it keeps freezing.
Oh. All right. Let's just do YouTube. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I'll just share it later.
Oh, here you go. It's coming back. Okay. All right, go back.
Okay.
Keep going.
So we'll take it from there. We have your first your few elements of your bio, but I just wanna go directly into this very the topic of this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is now extremely it's the world is watching right now. We're almost 3 weeks after a major conflict, right? And I just want your input about everything right now, and also in the recent past, and if you can relate that to the way you grew up and how you left Palestine and what it means to you right now, this whole conflict, and where is it going? Just in a few words.
Right. I think the usage of the word conflict actually does a disservice to what's going on the ground. I think conflict it insinuates that there are two sides that are actively, you know, fighting against each other, and that's not the case, right? In Palestine, you have an oppressor and you have an oppressed, and the oppressed population, which is the Palestinian population, that's subjugated to checkpoints, subjugated to lack of freedom of movement, lack of access to resources, lack of the right of return, you know, is fighting off oppression. Just like in South Africa, South African apartheid was not a conflict, right? You had a black majority population that was subjugated and oppressed through institutionalized racism that was legalized, right? And here it's the same thing. So just on that note, you know, the term conflict really does a disservice to what's actually going on.
And I'm actually glad I made the mistake, because this tells you how much even, you know, people like myself who are trying to find quote unquote truth are still subjugated and victims of, you know, big mainstream media headlines, and still like the logos, the word that comes out instinctively, we're using those words. So I apologize, and on one hand, but no, I know, but on the other hand, I'm glad I made the mistake, because it also like clears things out, and this is to tell you how subjugated we are. So it's not a conflict, definitely not. And thank you. This is an amazing. You gave it in just a few seconds. You told us exactly what is going on. So, so how do you reply to the common narrative then that you see in the media as a Palestinian?
So there's a lot of narratives. Do you have a specific narrative that you'd like me to respond to, or?
Yeah. So I mean, I let's call it the dominant. I'm not sure if I should use the word Zionist, because I realize Zionism is interpreted in many different ways, but you know, the dominant narrative in the media. So from your standpoint, you're given a voice. So what, you know, addressing yourself to the dominant media, to the dominant thought.
100%.
What do you say?
So, you know, I think one of the main narratives that I'll speak on American media, right?
Yes,
because
yes.
I think that that's, you know, where most of the inaccuracies lie, and there's a purpose behind that, right? But the common narrative and what usually happens when there's an outbreak of violence in Palestine on the Israeli side is that, and this is post, I'm speaking on my lifetime, right? I can't speak on pre-2000s and all the way from the 1960s onwards, but since the inception of Hamas, the militant faction in Gaza, the media coverage has always started post-Hamas firing rockets, right? So in this instance, for example, there was a situation in which families were being forcefully evicted from their homes in the town or little village in East Jerusalem called Sheikh Jarrah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So families, including the families of Muhammad and Muna al-Kurd, very prominent Palestinian activists, are
Very
being
young too, right?
Yeah, 22, and I'm not sure about Muna's age, but yeah, very young, and they're documenting this process of forced eviction, right? And there's the media is trying to portray this as a real estate dispute, and you know, they say that there are legal documents to prove the ownership of the Jewish population or the Jewish landowners prior to 1956, and you know, this is something that Muhammad al-Kurd says: you can't seek justice in you can't seek justice from the oppressor, basically, right? Like only because something is legal does not make it just, and it does not make it the right thing or the moral thing. And I think you see that with apartheid. Apartheid was legalized in South Africa. There were a bunch of laws that were intertwined and made it legal for people to discriminate and to force South Africans into these Bantustans, which is what we have in the West Bank right now. And so the situation in Sheikh Jarrah, what has happened is that families are being forcefully evicted. And then there was, for 1 or 2 months, you know, there was a barrage of just military oppression from the Israeli police onto Palestinian peaceful protesters. And then the tipping point was that these Israeli police officers, which do not have any legal jurisdiction over East Jerusalem under international law, but still parole as if it's their land and they have legal jurisdiction, they actually went to the holiest mosque in Palestine called Masjid al-Aqsa, where protesters were praying, And then they started firing bombs and stun grenades into the holiest site, right?
Wow.
And Hamas, being a religious and militant faction, was like, guys, you can't do this.
Can't do that.
Like, you can't fire bombs into our holiest site. And this is 2 months after tensions and protests every single day. So Hamas was like, you guys need to leave the premises by 6 p.m. or else we're going to respond. And they didn't leave the premises. And so Hamas responded with rockets. And that's when the media coverage in American media starts. And then it's like, oh, it's a conflict. Rockets from Gaza are firing and onto Israeli citizens, but they ignore the last 2 months and, frankly, the last 72 years of military occupation that our people have been going through, right? So it's actually, quite frankly, very racist, because you take out the context. You completely ignore the oppression of the Palestinian people and paint us as these non-peaceful people, and barbaric and savage. And, you know, I can go back to the works of Edward Said, the very prominent Palestinian scholar, that talked about Orientalism, the way that the West looks at the East,
Middle East,
as like terrorist, savage, brutal, without contextualizing anything, and to make us seem like, you know, we are born with hate in our heart and we would just want to kill Jews for fun because that's what we were born to do. No one is born hateful, right? That's not how the world works. That's not how human being works. And when you subjugate and oppress a people for 72 years, there's going to be a lot of hate, right? So that's a response that I use quite often to this narrative of Palestinians being these savages and barbaric, and you guys don't want peace. What if you could just have peace? What could we? It just, you know.
I have two questions from what you just said. First of all, you used the word racist.
Yes.
But I'm very, I mean, and it's not something that only applies to you know, Palestinians or Israelis or Jewish people, but even like in my home country, is it? But let's go back to Palestinians. I have trouble understanding. Is this a national? So if you use the word racist, it goes to biology, but isn't this a national fight for freedom? So see what I'm trying to say is, you're right about the narrative. The media tends to turn us one against the other based on, you know, different divisions, which usually call up those you know, racist sort of elements, even like woman, man, black, white, you know, Jewish, Muslim. But isn't Palestinian, the whole Palestinian quote unquote cause, you probably also disagree with that, you know, expression. I kind of do. Isn't that more of a national, a fight for national freedom, which has nothing to do with, you know, the type of racist sort of pointing out of the media or narrative?
Okay, well, here's what I would say to that. When someone like, for example, Tucker Carlson or you know, these American pundits call us savages and terrorists and heartless based on our ethnicity, based on the fact that we are Arabs, based on the fact that we are Palestinian, and when there's a system of oppression that denies us entry into our homeland based on our ethnicity, I call that racism. Because a Jew living in Brooklyn, living in New York, can go into Safad for free. He can do his birthright trip, he can do whatever he wants, and he can go back just because he's Jewish. But me, being Palestinian, being born in Jerusalem, I'm not allowed to go back. So maybe you have a different word for that, but I call it racism for sure.
So this is the in terms of the Israel, it doesn't allow you the right to go back, right? That's you're not.
So for your viewers, maybe they're not very.
No, they're not. Yeah, you have to explain those things, even to me.
And I always, because this is something that's really, you know, just hurts me to my core. A Jew living in Brooklyn, living wherever in the world, they have this thing called birthright. So the word birthright. So you have a right based on, you know, being born Jewish to actually take a free trip to the homeland and go and explore and have fun and go to clubs and do everything you want. But Palestinian refugees for the past 72 years, Palestinians have been living in this land for 4,000 years, are not allowed to go back, right? Palestinians, there's 7 million of us around the world dispersed, 7 million refugees, and we're not allowed to go back to our homeland because for the people that don't know, Israel, we consider Israel the whole land. So I actually have it tattooed on my hand. This whole land for us is Palestine. Because I'm from what is now Israel in the north, right? Like my family comes from Safad, and my grandfather's home is actually now a museum for Bulgarian Jews. And he was forced out of it. And there's this law in Israel called the absentee law, which basically after the 1948 war, when Israel forcefully expulsed 750,000 Palestinians from their homes, including my own grandfather, they took over our homes and they created the state of Israel on the ashes of the Palestinian society that was living there, right? Very similar to Native Americans and American colonialists coming from Europe. So I kind of, no, the question was, no, I remember the question, I'm sorry. So there's just this injustice in terms of when you see someone from California that's like, oh, I'm going on my birthright trip, I'm gonna go to Israel, and I can't go back to my homeland because I'm Palestinian. And I even went and I asked them once, because they were on campus at UCSB, they were like, you know, trying to promote their thing, and I was like, hey guys, like, I'm born in Jerusalem, can I get a free trip? And they were like, yeah, what's your name? I'm like, I'm Marwan Abdelhamid, and I identify as Palestinian. And then, you know, they froze up. They're like, no, I don't know, you can't. And it's just crazy to me that since I identify as Palestinian, I can't go back to my homeland, right?
I think this is where things kind of freeze, right? In every single talk. I mean, I've listened to quite a lot of debates, and this is even the most, let's say, open-minded of the other side. When you get to the question of like why Palestinians can't go back, they kind of like, they're very uncomfortable and don't have an answer to that, right? Isn't that true? But you also spoke of peace and justice, right? People talk about peace. So what about justice? And how do you see those two words, and what do you think is the way to those two?
For
and
sure.
We should definitely include justice, right? Because I think people talk a lot about peace, but what about justice? And where is justice? For
sure. Great question. When people talk about peace, usually Americans, what they mean is just stop. Just stop resisting, right? Stop being mad at the fact that you're oppressed. Just calm down and go back and go through your checkpoints and just take it. What they mean is surrender when they say peace.
Is it surrender, or is it just let's keep the status quo? I'm not sure if it's surrendering, because I was listening to...
No, it is definitely. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, no, it's definitely surrender, because for us the status quo is a status quo in which we have no rights. So it is surrender, right? Because at the end of the day, like you said, we're fighting for our freedom, we're fighting for our liberation and for our rights. And so the status quo only benefits the oppressor. And when you benefit from a system of oppression, it's within your interest to maintain that system of oppression, right? And there is no point in human history when an oppressed nation has not fought for its rights. Like there's, you know, that's just not something that human beings are taught to do, to surrender. And so when you talk about justice, justice is a precursor to peace. Justice is acknowledging the fact that Palestinians were removed forcefully from their homes in 1948, because, you know, they call it their Independence Day, we call it the catastrophe, because in 1948, that was the destruction of Palestinian society. That was when Jaffa turned into Tel Aviv. That was when all of the Palestinian society, which was a vibrant society and a vibrant economy, was just, it crumbled, and dismantled. Yeah, so no Israeli prime minister has ever acknowledged the Nakba. The Nakba is the catastrophe in Arabic. They've never acknowledged the fact that in 1948, actually, they destroyed Palestinian society. And so that's one piece of justice that needs to be addressed, right? There needs to be Israeli society needs to come to terms with the fact that their state is built on the ruins of my state, my country.
Are there groups though that are acknowledging it, and how are they doing it? No
well,
one?
there's like Beit Salem, a human rights group. There's another group of Israeli soldiers, ex-Israeli soldiers, IDF soldiers, called Breaking the Silence, that are talking about the occupation in ways that, you know, 20 years ago would have been inconceivable. They're talking about the fact that they go into these homes and they raid these homes, and they're breaking the silence, literally, quite literally. And you know, now they're like considered terrorists in Israel. It's so funny. And
Where do they live? Do they still live inside of Israel? Or?
Yeah, they give talks and they're so brave. Like, there's a bunch of Israelis that are talking about this, but they're still a bit, you know, they're marginalized, and the you know, Israeli society as a whole kind of shuns them as traitors and stuff. But we love them as Palestinians, as you know, we need them.
How many are there? Like, I just wonder, like, in terms of numbers, that specific group of ex-Israeli soldiers, because I believe, like, being an ex-Israeli soldier, you probably talk the truth, right?
Yeah. I don't know the exact number of the Breaking the Silence organization. We could look it up, but they're you know, they do a lot of public speaking events, and they're prominent. They're great, Breaking the Silence.
So on the other side, do they work with people on the other side, or people from the diaspora, to sort of? And now we're going to try and talk about solution, which is, I mean, I'm not asking you what is the solution. I mean, if somebody, you know, I was going to ask whose fault was the initial thing, you know, but some people might answer, you know, the British, or who created this mess, you know. But at this point, I mean, it's definitely important to know, but it's also important to know and move on. So just also tell me a little bit about that. So who do you think created this mess there? Just like a little bit, again, I know you have to give like short answers to huge topics.
No.
But
I can definitely give you an answer to that. And usually when I talk about this, I like to go back to the inception of Zionism as a political ideology. Zionism was born, and its founder was called Theodor Herzl. He was a European Jew that said, basically, he was like, you know, we're being persecuted in Europe. They hate us because we're Jewish. So we're going to go and we're going to create our own country, which, you know, in theory makes sense, right? And so basically, yeah, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say, I actually, yeah, and also, I mean, if that helps, I also heard like early Zionism was exactly what you said, plus the fact that the common Jewish person, the Jewish people in Europe or around the world were feeling, yeah, like I want to be quote unquote normal and live a normal life in my own homeland. That's how how early Zionism was seeing it. I don't want to be in a ghetto. I don't want to be, you know, pointed at. So that was early Zionism.
100%. 100%. And, you know, it's very important also to understand that Zionism is a colonial entity, right? The political ideology of Zionism is rooted in colonialism because it sought to displace a native population and replace it with another. That's why people say settler colonialism, because the creation of a Jewish state in the land of Palestine, which was majority Palestinian Arab, right? To create a Jewish state, you would need to displace that population of Palestinians that were living there. And that's why they came in. So what happened basically is that the Zionist project aligned with the British government in the 1900s, because, and there's a lot of backstory, I don't want to get into it, but it's basically World War I incentives. The Zionists were basically like, guys, we can get America to come in and help you guys in World War I, to the British. So basically they made a deal, and then the British, they did this thing called the Balfour Declaration. So Arthur Balfour was like this, I think not prime minister, some government official in Britain, and he basically stated Britain's approval for in the land of Palestine, right? And
just
then
one letter, right? This was just one letter, if I'm not mistaken.
From Balfour to Herzl, I'm pretty sure, or no, Chaim Weizmann, who was like the leader of the Zionist project at the time, because Theodor Herzl died before he even saw the state of Israel, which is crazy to me. But so then, yeah, World War I happens, and then the British, they're like, ooh, the British and the French, they signed this agreement called the Sykes Agreement, which basically carved up the land of what they called Arabia into French and British territory. So the French, they were like, okay, we'll get like we'll get like Syria and Lebanon and like Iraq, and then you guys can get like down, the British, right? And this was in direct contradiction with what the British had promised the Arabs, because the Arabs helped the British fight the Ottomans in World War One. And in return for that, they were supposed to get liberation. They were supposed to be free, the Arabs. But that didn't happen. And then the British came and they colonized us. They colonized Palestine. And we're like, okay, khas, we're colonized now. Okay, cool. And then they started to facilitate mass Jewish immigration into Palestine. So the Palestinian Arabs living in Palestine, who, by the way, there was a lot of Jews, like a minority of Jews that were living in Palestine. And, you know, I probably have a lot of Jewish DNA from my past. Like, this has never been a question of Jewish versus Palestinian. It's always been a question of colonizer versus oppressed, right? Like, that's something that we need to make very clear, because for Palestinians, you had the British as a colonial entity that came into Palestine, colonized us, and then they helped spread mass Jewish immigration into Palestine. And the Palestinians were like, whoa, guys, like, this is our land, you know, and you're letting these European Jews come in and settle, and they're doing these settlements and taking our land and extorting us into selling the homes and stuff. And it obviously tension rose, because the Palestinians, who were seen as an indigenous population, didn't like the fact that these European Jews were coming and settling and taking their homes. And all of this culminated in the Jewish withdrawal, or not Jewish, the British withdrawal from the land because of Jewish terrorism. So the IDF, the composition of the IDF was actually two Jewish terrorist organizations, the Irgun and the Lehava, that joined forces, and they bombed a bunch of hotels, and like they did a lot of like terrorist stuff. The British were like, okay, we don't want to be here anymore.
Now you sort it out.
And then, yeah, they gave it to this new entity called the United Nations. So then the United Nations, Katerina, they were like, okay, what are we going to do with this? The Palestinians, they don't want to split up this land because it's their land, right? Like, why would you want to split something that's yours? And the Jews, they want their own state. So what they decided to do, Katerina, is they decided to give 55% of the land to the Jews that own 10% of the land. They own 10% and they give them 55. And then the Arabs were like, okay, you guys could get 45. And then, you know, my ancestors were like, no, like we don't want that. And then there was a war. All of the Arab countries tried to invade. And can I swear? Can I swear, or is it?
Yeah, we're on YouTube, or it's fine.
So all these like Egypt, Syria, they all tried to invade because they didn't agree with this partition plan from the UN. And the Jewish entity obviously agreed, because they wanted to take anything they could get, and they wanted to expand their borders. They attacked. The Arabs got fucked. And then basically what happened is that the Palestinians got the short end of the stick, and 750,000 of us actually had to leave Palestine. 300,000 of us left Palestine and were forced from Palestine before the war started. This is something that's very important to talk about, because a lot of Zionists will be like, yeah, you know, it was just war. We didn't want to kick you guys out. It's just a consequence of war. 300,000 Palestinians actually were forcefully evicted and forcefully expelled from Palestine before any Arab army stepped into the land. So there was a planned campaign to move the Palestinians out. And you can go into the records and you can see Ben Gurion talking about, you know, his plan for Palestinian expulsion, because Palestinians were the majority, and you could not establish a Jewish state with the Palestinians in the land. So they expelled us to Jordan, to Lebanon, which we're still living in today, and they established their majority Jewish state. And, you know, they've subjugated us and oppressed us ever since, because we, as Palestinians, are a threat to their supremacist state. Do you understand?
So yeah, of course I understand, and I know most of it. I'm very uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable talking about it because, you know, I might have knowledge, but I don't master all the terminology and all the historical events and the dates, which you obviously do. But what I notice when you talk, and I also watched a lot of your debates, and I see that a lot, is like people use one term or the other, and that gets other people, and me being Greek, very confused. So you hear Israel, then you hear Israeli state, then you hear Jewish state,
Right.
then you hear Zionism or Zionist. So all
Yeah.
these terms are, I think we need to clarify that. And I talked earlier about, at least now I have it clarified myself regarding early Zionism and what is today Zionism, and I also, I feel that because you talked about Jewish state, and I think you're talking about, the war back in, I mean, there's been many wars, but is there a point where initially, the early Zionist dream of the Israeli normal state, I mean, where Jewish people would have a normal life in a state, is there a point where it shifted from that, from this to that, from Israel to like Jewish state? Because one, I think, is more of a nation, and the other one is a religion.
Well, they see no. So for a lot of Zionists, Judaism is an ethno-religion, right? So they see themselves as the nation, the Jewish nation, which is an ethno-religion. And I'm not here to argue with people on what they identify as. I know a lot of people like to argue with Zionists and tell them that they can't identify with this and that. I'm not here to do that, to be honest. But it's important to note, I'll explain Zionism to you. Let's say you have a bunch of Greek people, you guys have been kicked out by Turkey, let's say, and you're like, okay, we want to come back to our land, and you come together, you create your own little congress, and then you do anything you can to come back to your land, and it makes sense, right? But the thing is, what the early Zionists did not understand is that the indigenous Palestinian population was not going to just leave, because they identify with that land and this is their homeland. And the Palestinians have repeatedly said, we will live with you, we will coexist with you, but we cannot coexist with you as less. We like Palestinians
Why
living.
can't we be equal?
That's what I'm saying. And the crazy part is that, Zionism inherently is anti-Palestinian. And that's why a lot of Palestinians, we identify as anti-Zionist, because Zionism at its core, there was a necessitated the destruction of Arab and Palestinian society in this land, because the majority of it was not Jewish. And we could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And it just became, this is basically what really is shocking to me is if you see the map of Palestine, and I don't have the technical tools. I wanted to do more with, I wanted to have a map and everything. But what is shocking to me is that you have Gaza, and then you have an in-between, right, which is Israel.
Sure.
And then you have the West Bank, which is west of the river, and then you have what's called islands
within the West Bank.
Within the West Bank,
well, we call them. Well, I call them Bantustans, just like in South Africa, because it's crazy, Katerina. So just a bit more history. In 1993, there was this accord that was signed by the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Israeli government. To basically make peace, right? And to come to terms and to say, basically, we're going to establish a Palestinian state on 20% of historic Palestine. Imagine. So we give them 80%, we take 20%. Khalas. They're going to shake hands, Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. And then it didn't happen for a bunch of reasons. But what we ended up with as the Palestinian population is going from, okay, I'm going to take one quick little step back, because I don't want to spend too much time on history. But so you were talking about the West Bank and Gaza. So just to make it a bit more visual, the West Bank and Gaza are here. So this is, most of this is Israel, right? Gaza is here, and then the West Bank is like here.
Right.
And that's all we have as Palestinians. But within the West Bank, Katerina, you have this thing, they're called settlements. And they're basically Jewish communities that are built on Palestinian land, which is, for me, all of it is Palestinian land, but like officially, the West Bank is Palestinian territory. And they build these settlements that are Jewish only and that are protected by the Israeli Defense Forces. And these guys are religious extremists. That's the definition of religious extremism, because they believe that this is the Holy Land and God gave the land to them. So fuck these Palestinians. They need to go back to Saudi Arabia where they came from. Right? Why would they stand in the way of me and my land and my religion and all this. So these settlers, a lot of them, and I don't want to make generalizations, but they are very, very anti-Palestinian, because we stand between what they see as the Eretz Israel, which is a completely Jewish ethno-state with no Palestinians, only Jews, and they come and they live on Palestinian territory, and they establish these communities, and they take up all of the water. By the way, you know, there's a lot of disputes
the resources.
over water.
Yeah, there's blocking.
They take up all of the resources because the settlements are actually they're subsidized by the Israeli government, right? So there's a lot of incentives for Israelis to leave Brooklyn and come and live on the outskirts of Ramallah, which is a Palestinian village, right? Like you could see there's like ads, there's advertisements from the Jewish government, from the Israeli government, that's like, oh, like come live in this wonderful gated community outside of Ramallah, outside of Hebron, like they say it. And it's crazy because, you know, I think it's 40% of these settlers are actually American. The prime minister of Israel that just got elected last week, Katerina, he's from
taking over tomorrow, right?
He's from Berkeley. Like,
he's from Brooklyn?
Berkeley.
Oh, Berkeley. He's from Berkeley. Oh, wow.
Isn't that crazy? And he's like, oh, I have a God-given right. And like the Palestinians have been living there for like 500 to 1,000 years. They're like, no, like, nah, you guys have to leave. Go back to Jordan, guys. Like, you know what I mean?
I mean, if everybody, you know, I mean, where should anyone go back to? I mean, it's hard to, if we talk like genes and biology, like I'm Greek and I'm a mix of God knows what, like, you know, it's never, the problem is what do we do now? And you're an activist. I mean, I think you call yourself an activist, and, or is it something that other people call you? I don't know.
I just talk. I just no.
I mean, and what you talk is great. The way you talk is great because you make it simple for everybody else to understand. And I mean, it's very interesting to see you face a young Israeli. I watched Rudy Ruckman and you. I still, and this is not a criticism to you or the other side. It's just that I feel that and it's. I mean, I like talking to you right now, and I feel that you are more direct. But I feel that when you talk to the other side, a person your age, and of course you have to be a little more, you know, not diplomatic, but, you know, you have to be careful how you say things. But I feel that what is the new generation talks in words that are difficult for me to understand, that they talk a lot about, you know, brotherhood, and, you know, we got to sit down and talk. But even listening to you and Rudy Ruckman, I felt that the gap was still, you know, big. And I felt that you guys were not talking on the same level,
of course.
You know, and I want to see from your perspective, like, how do you resolve this? And what do you think, or, you know, even if practically you feel like things cannot be done like overnight, just give me your vision. What is your vision? And what do you think can be done in an ideal world?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that. You know, the reason, so I did that talk with Rudy Brockman last year. So that was a year ago. And I've grown since then, for sure. I've grown in my activism and my way of thinking. But the reason why I did that, because, you know, a lot of people were against it because they don't like to see that. I did it because I wanted to reach a new audience. Because we are in the age of mass information. We're in the age of virality. And so, you know, I felt like I could reach a new audience and I could change people's minds. And I actually did. You know, I've gotten a lot of messages from Zionists saying, you know, you've opened up my perspective. And, you know, in an ideal world, what I see is, you know, two nations living with equal power and with equal responsibilities. And, you know, just to paint kind of like a poetic picture, I to be honest, I want to be able to go back to Safad, my grandfather's home, and to, you know, live there and to raise my kids, whether it be in Haifa, which is in Israel, whether it be in Jerusalem, whether it be in Gaza. I want to be able to travel to all those places without getting stopped at a checkpoint because I identify as Palestinian, you know. I want to be able to go and to I have a bunch of songs about this. You know, that's why I make music, because I can express myself better through music than just through talking like this, in terms of, you know, visions and stuff. But you know, our vision as Palestinians, it's not to kill all Jews and to drive them into the sea. And I understand why they feel that way, you know, because there is a lot of intergenerational drama that's projected onto us as Palestinians. We are not a threat to the existence of the Israeli or Jewish people. We're not. You know, they're a nuclear state. We're not, realistically speaking, not a threat militarily. But, you know, you talk to most people in Palestine, and for the past 70 years, all we've wanted is equal rights and freedom of movement and free, you know, no lack of or restrictions of movement, of resources. And
I
we
mean,
haven't been.
is it that hard to get? I mean, if I were, but what is so? So you're not talking about a two-state solution or federation, right? You just want one country, basically.
Yeah, and you know,
in political terms.
I don't like to talk logistics just yet, because I'm not, you know, I don't represent my people on a political aspect or a political level. So I feel like it's not within my right to, you know, project my thoughts.
No, I'm just asking you personally, so you have the right.
Yeah, I see one country, or one nation, one state. I see, you know, one army, and I see a place where it's very important to understand that, you know, when I say this, it's not to take away from the suffering, right? But in the future, you have to imagine the future, because one of the things of settler, like a big proponent of settler colonialism, is to sort of trap you in this reality where you think that this is the way it is, right? We're just going to have checkpoints our whole lives. And that's not true, right? You know, I'm not sure how old you are, but maybe you remember that
I could be your mom, but yeah, if that gives you an idea.
The Berlin Wall, for example, no one, I mean, I talked to people that were alive back then, and no one thought that was going to fall. The Cold War, no one thought that was going to end. South African apartheid, people thought that was going to go on forever. And I think now, you know, we've had a little moment right now in this day and age as Palestinians. More people are starting to wake up and understand. And I do think that international pressure is a big proponent to freedom, because, you know, the less incentives Israel has to keep oppressing us, and they realize that, you know, the cons outweigh the pros, we'll get what we want. You know,
I agree. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No. That's what I had to say.
No, well, you mentioned, I think there's a definite shift right now, and allow me to get into your territory of super young people active on social media. And I think the sisters, Bella and Gigi Hadid, played an immense role. I actually think that they're very courageous to speak up. But I looked just yesterday at their Instagram account, and both of them have over 100 million people. So that's like 1/3 of the United States in terms of numbers. So if these two girls can, and they're, what are they, second or third generation Palestinians? They're not even 100% Palestinians, but they understand that they have to protect an identity, and I think it's more cultural than anything else. And I think they feel like they have to protect this, and they're very outspoken. I think this is very courageous, and I think this is very strong. And I also want to say that, you know, I'm Greek, and like your people, you know, we have a lot of what you said resonates with a lot of, I didn't want to interfere, and because I get accused of like interrupting a lot, but I'm very new at what I'm doing. You know, I'm no journalist. I'm also kind of like you. I'm an artist. You know, I write. I also sing. I used to be an actress. So a lot of what you said resonates with me, and I feel that, you know, the whole world can become Palestine, believe it or not. Because this idea of let's be shut in our own communities, and let's, you know, and kind of like, you know, let's forget about countries, let's forget about national identities, and let's forget about borders too. And this is something your speaker again, Rudy Rochman, said. You know, you were talking about country, you were talking about borders. Not really about borders in terms of like, you know, but defining like a territory. And your co-speaker was talking about you know, we don't want borders, you know, we kind of, so I felt, you know, that every single place on earth right now can be Palestine, can be shut communities with no rights, with a number of rules they have to obey to, and with like a very specific compliance to things, you know. And this applies to Greece as well. And anybody who has a strong national identity has to be very, very careful. So that's why I feel that, you know, when young voices speak up on social media and they have nothing behind them, they have no money backing them, they just speak for themselves, is extremely important. And I feel that people are always on the side of the people, always. Like if you ask me, I'm on the side of Palestine and Palestinians as well as Israelis, but probably not on the side of a state that's oppressive. So that is different from the Israelis themselves, the citizens, because usually people are people, and people just want to live peacefully and work and, you know, and be good with their neighbors. But the states have different stories. So I feel that, yeah, as you said, there's a big shift, and I mean there's a big movement right now, and that could put pressure on international institutions. And I know your mother, you said it in one of your interviews, was in the UN, right, in the United Nations, but you mentioned something about bureaucracy and things are very slow. So you're being active and singing songs and spreading the word is very effective, right?
You know, just two things about that. So my grandfather was actually the Palestinian ambassador to Greece.
Oh, I was gonna say that because I found this online. So your grandfather was the ambassador of Palestine to Greece in 2004. He actually has a statement which is in the I found it online, where he was collaborating with the Greek government at the time during the Olympic Games, to try. Did
you see that video?
Yes, I did. So that's your grandfather. So have you ever been to Greece? And I haven't finished with some of the other questions, but I know you're very busy. You're a very busy young man. I just want to ask about, like, what do you know about Greece? Have you been to Greece? And
yeah, I went when I was a child to visit my grandfather. You know, he had his office there, and wow. I remember very distinctly the pistachio ice cream.
Oh, pistachio ice cream. I come from the island of Veina. It's the land of pistachio, believe me. And I have 300 trees in my yard. So
amazing.
I just have so I want to go into your artistic activism. I love your songs. Maybe Charles, if he hears me, maybe I don't know if we'll find a way of featuring your song, even if it's post live. I love the music that you write. I love the fact that I love how you mix English, French, and Arabic in your songs. We have some common background with you, because I think you went to the French school, right? French lycée or something.
No.
But you're fluent in French.
At home.
Huh?
Yeah. French is our native. Like, I speak French at home. So.
Okay, so yeah, so the way you use and you change from one language to another is impressive. I'm gonna copy you and do that. And your songs are highly political, obviously. So what is your dream in that field? Because I think even your startup, which again I'm gonna mention it for those who joined later on, you have this you have this app called Grow Home, which is you're connecting Palestinian startups and young entrepreneurs with money that comes from the diaspora or
and expertise, and talent, and time,
which I think is a great concept and idea. So tell me a little bit about this, and we're gonna go back to the songs.
Okay. So Grow Home was born out of, as you mentioned earlier, a realization on my end that foreign aid is not our savior as Palestinians, and an understanding that startups are actually solving problems and you know, creating employment and solving real local Palestinian problems and create, you know, there's a big shift in Palestinian culture now, because before it was just, okay, go become a doctor, go become a lawyer. Now people are studying law, studying medicine, and they can't get jobs, right? Like there's lawyers in Gaza that have like studied, done everything, and they just can't get a job. And so they're turning to themselves, they're looking inwards, and they're creating startups. And these people are brilliant in Palestine, absolutely brilliant. However, they don't have access to the resources that I do in Santa Barbara, right? They can't go and call up someone in Silicon Valley or whatever. And I think that's unfair. And I think that, you know, in Silicon Valley, from my time with Grow Home, I've realized that we have a lot of Palestinians in Silicon Valley, like a lot. And, you know, we wanted to connect people in positions of power and privilege, Palestinians, use their resources, use their talent, and use their funds to help our people back home. Because, you know, it's good to do activism, and it's good to spread the word, but also at the end of the day, you can't romanticize Palestine too much, because there's people that are living there that need to eat, right? So
it all boils down to economics, to be honest with you, and social justice. Even the whole all of what we discussed before, which we focused on the historical and identical and cultural part. You know, it all boils down to economic, and sometimes even cultural and history diverts us from reality, which is that. And if we can solve that, you know, rich people have nothing there's no division between them. If you were a very rich Palestinian in Beverly Hills, you would love your very rich Israeli next to you and no problem. You know what I mean? So it all boils down to I mean, people with money are a different planet. That's what I'm trying to say.
100%.
So go back to that. So yeah, you're connecting those two.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And I think Grow Home should be very much used at some point to my home country as well.
Sure, yeah.
Because there's 10 millions of Greeks right now in Greece, but the diaspora has always been huge. My own people have gone away from, you know, decades ago, and generations have grown abroad, and they need that. We need that. And more people are leaving Greece due to economics as well. But you said your startup, in one of your interviews, you said that your startup is you just want to, all you want to do is music and be an artist. So yeah. What is your next project, like artistic, and let's say, tell me about yourself. Where do you think you're going to be in 1 year in terms of a musical artist or an artist, and in 10 years maybe?
So thank you for asking me that question. I you know, this year I was living with 11 human beings. Like you know, like in a house with 11 frat boys. So it's very difficult. There's no privacy. It's very difficult to record music, to record content. So everything I've done in Santa Barbara has been at like 20% capacity. You know what I mean? And next year, I have my own apartment in Santa Barbara. So I'm going to go crazy. Wow. I'm going to go absolutely crazy. And the cool thing is, I've decided in this past month, I've done a lot of self-reflection. And you know, I think music, I love making music. It's just insane. I mean, you know this too, like the feeling you get when you listen to your song after you've recorded, it's like, oh shit, like I created this. This is a piece of art. And even if people don't like it, I like it. I mean, I'm my biggest fan. My mom maybe will disagree, but like I really like.
I'm probably one of your big fans as well, and I've only listened to seconds of your songs.
Well, that's very nice of you. But you know, I think this past year I've seen that there's interest in what I'm doing musically, and I've grown up. You know, my father, really, he's the reason why I'm so musical. We grew up listening to Wyclef Jean and Lenny Kravitz and Michael Jackson, and you know, my whole life I've just been into music. I used to play piano, saxophone, and then, you know, when I was like 16, I was like, let's try this rap thing, because that's all I listened to. I went to a studio, fucked around, and like it's been like for like 2 years just made shit music. And then, then we dropped Jerusalem Freestyle last October, and the reception was amazing. And it was heartwarming. And I never thought that I would get, like hundreds of thousands of streams on my songs. That's just something I never expected. And so now I'm at a point, Katerina, you're catching me at a point where, I'm 20, man. Like, I'm still developing.
You're 20, you sound, in terms of knowledge, like you're 64. And then, sorry, that's a compliment.
Thank you. But, I'm still discovering myself, and I do believe, or my goal at least, and I'm going to make sure that I get there, is to be a global superstar. I want to be Drake. I want to be bigger than Drake. Awesome. And I think I can be bigger than Drake. No disrespect to Drake, I love him. But the reason I say Drake is because he is actually global, right? Or for example, like Bad Bunny, like these are global empires. They've built global empires, and I want to build in my 20s. I want to build a global empire so that when I'm 30, when I'm 40, I have the power, I have the capital, and I have the influence to be able to, for example, start a venture capital fund that funds Palestinian businesses that solve local problems. I can build my own Palestinian leadership university, because I think that's one of the biggest things that we're lacking in Palestine is leadership. I can go and I can actually, build a center to teach Palestinian refugees about real estate and about how to actually manage that. Like there's a lot of projects that I want to work. I want to go and sell CBD cigarettes, because we smoke too many cigarettes in Palestine, and we need to replace that shit with something else. So in my 20s, I really want to do what I love, which is music, and I want to, spread that with the whole entire world. And, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. My goal for next year after I graduate is to go and do a world tour and go to every single country in the world with my producer and make a song with a local artist, and then have that become a documentary and sell it off to HBO, Netflix.
And you have a Greek artist here that would...
You'll look back at the interview in 2 years, hopefully, and you'll be like, oh shit, like he's spoken into existence. Because I really believe in manifestation. That's why I talk about the vision for Palestine, and I live as if we were in that world already. There's actually this trend on Twitter. It's like tweet as if it's free. And then there's people that are just tweeting like, like just got back to my house in Gaza. We're tasting the oranges with our grandma right now. Like I just moved from Jaffa to Jerusalem. Who wants to come with me? I really believe in manifestation and to living in that world. And, I think as a Palestinian, I think a lot of people, as you said, identify with our struggle. And my brand is Palestine.
It's amazing.
And I want to be able to share that with the world through music, because I really, really enjoy doing that. Like, and I've been thinking a lot about, okay, what do I enjoy doing? Okay, it's music. Tayyip, go, yahi. If it's music, fucking go do music. Don't go and, because I'll be honest with you, like I tried to like start another little startup, like very Silicon Valley, like billion-dollar unicorn type of thing, and I looked at myself and I'm like, I don't want to spend the next 5 years doing that shit. Yeah. Like I want to make music, make people happy, perform. That's one thing that I really, really want to do, is like to be able to go out and have people sing my song back to me. I think I would just cry.
That's great. I'm very I totally understand what you're saying. This is exactly where I come from as a human being. I also understand what you're saying by, you said I want to be global, and for me, because I had to like research on you and find many more things about you, is I realized that you were born kind of global, just even you have those 4 identities in you, right?
Yeah.
Algerian, French, Algerian, French, Palestinian, and Serbian. Yet Palestinian is what is the strongest, probably because of what you lived, the way you grew up, your father, your grandfather, but also I think because I think the struggle itself speaks to you. Like that's what makes you more human and vulnerable. I think that's probably the vulnerability that made you become the artist that you already are, but of course who will grow. So I think you have the global in you, and the only thing you have to do is just manifest it. And of course that's going to happen. If you ask me, I think it's, even if you don't try, it's going to be in your path. But of course you're working hard for it, because it comes with hard work. But I think you also are what I have a script which I never finished, but it was called High Trees. You know, the highest trees usually have the deepest roots. So you really, and I think for me, this is the strongest metaphor of a struggle, like trying to grow, but being deeply rooted. So I totally understand where you're coming from, why you speak out, why you want to speak out for Palestine, for example, and not so much for Algeria or France or Serbia, even though I don't think those four countries, interestingly so, have a lot of things in common, and that being the national identity and cultural identity. But yeah, so all I can say is, unless you have something to add, and look at my notes, like I had 3 million notes, and I just didn't even look at, and maybe I just looked at one or two things because I was just entrenched and taken by what you had to say. But if you want to add anything to this today, I don't want to keep you any longer. Just feel free to do it.
No, this was great, Katerina. Thank you. I think, the only thing I would say is that as Palestinians, we really appreciate the love from anyone. Like it's so heartwarming for me to see people that have nothing to do with this, like coming in and speaking about it and defending us on a global level, because too often, and speaking about it, but also amplifying Palestinian voices. So you were talking about young people on social media. The Kurd siblings, Mona and Muhammad, they've amassed, millions of followers, and they don't have any money behind them. Like, they don't have a government sponsoring their fucking posts and shit. Like, they're just on their phone. Like, they started a revolution by doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it speaks to the cruelty of the Israeli occupation, and it speaks, the fact that they were arrested 2 days ago speaks to the fact that they, their existence as Palestinians trying to spread the truth. It's very, very scary to the oppressors, because once again, I'll repeat this, and I'll repeat this until it ends. When you benefit from a system of oppression, it is within your interest to maintain that system of oppression, and that's what we have today. And we need to dismantle that system of oppression in order to actually, get to a point where there is justice for both parties, and when then there is peace, because that's what. In 1993, there was no justice. There was just we were trying to get peace without actually looking back and understanding, why are we in this position in the first place, right? Like this, as you said, conflict, what I would just call situation. We need to understand that it's not 1,000-year-old fight for religion or whatever. There's a lot of deep-rooted feelings, and it's very hard when you say, oh, but my sister and my brother were killed, how do you expect me to just get over this? Man, I understand. I truly understand. But as I said before, we need to think of or I didn't say this before, but I always say, I'm thinking of my children. I'm thinking of I need my children to be born in Palestine, and I don't want them to go through checkpoints. I really don't. And we can stay in our own little echo chambers, and we can talk Palestinian to Palestinian. We can be like, free Palestine, free Palestine. But we know that we need to free Palestine, right? That's why I wanted to come and talk to you. That's why I go and I talk to these people like Rudy, because we're trying to be as global as possible, and we're trying to spread this message, because a liberated Palestine is a force of good in this world, not just in the region, in the world.
It's also a liberation for a big part of the Israeli people. I mean, they don't know 100%, right?
Yeah, because
whatever it is that they feel, whether they feel the trauma, whether they feel that, they shouldn't be bombed by, they shouldn't have rockets on them by Hamas, whatever they feel that it is, but you have to have that, as you said, that's why your work is very important. Civil society will do it. Civil society has to start the pressure on because signing a piece of paper and saying, oh, armistice or peace or whatever it is, doesn't sometimes apply on the ground, and it doesn't. We've seen it so many times.
That's why it failed in '93. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it doesn't make anything. Okay, well, that's great. The last thing I want to say is that I mean, I probably will hit you up again. I know you probably have less time than you even have now, but I'm thrilled that I bumped into you. I think I wish you the best of luck. I think there's a lot that we need to discuss in the future on all fronts. I wish you luck, and I think you will have it because you're a hard worker, you're super young, you have the right mind, and you have the knowledge, and most of all, you understand cultures and peoples, not people only, but peoples, and that is very important. So you have all the tools, and I can only but wish you good luck. And see you in the future. And I hope to I'll be editing some of the stuff in that live post live some of your music, and keep in touch.
Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much. This was amazing.
You're very welcome. I wish you the best. I wish all the peoples in the world the best.
How do you say thank you in Greek?
Ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ, Katerina.
Yeah. Parakalo. Oh, one last thing, and this is what I wanted to say. And you asked about my age, which of course is very easy if you Google it. But I have a very intense image in my mind growing up. When Yasser Arafat was still considered a terrorist around the world, he came to Greece, came down the stairs of the plane, and kissed the ground. So in a way, I grew up with the Greek people, you know, feeling that sense of brotherhood with your people.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, we're the same, man. We're all fucking same.
And we're all the fucking, and you know, we're all the same. And you know, I don't mean to exclude anyone. We have brothers in our own enemies, if you ask me as a Greek, you know, like, you know, supposedly we're enemies with the Turks, but we have brothers there as you in Palestine, you're, you know, Israelis are probably half of them, if not most of them, are your brothers, you know, in a way, even like, and I'm not only saying racially, but your way of life, the way you, we have to look into the civil society common ground in order to keep on putting pressure.
But it needs to be rooted in co-resistance to the occupation. That's very important. Because we can't just come together and eat hummus, you know?
No.
Deep in that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Hummus, or what you said in, you know, somebody said watermelon and cheese, which very few people would understand.
Amazing. I love that shit. You know, funny story for your listeners. Watermelon is a national symbol in Palestine because in the 1980s, the Palestinian flag, which is green, white, black, and red, it was banned. So people couldn't wave the Palestinian flag. This also goes to show how scared they are of us as a national group. So the Israelis banned the Palestinian flag. So what did we do? We fucking took watermelons because it's the same colors, and we started putting them on our heads and walking around with watermelons. So just a funny story to show you the resilience of Palestinian people, to just, you know, be able to like circumvent like this situation and just always be hopeful, and wow. It's just...
And okay, and my last word is, you know, this resistance for me has to spread throughout the world with what we're living today, where people, you know, are trying to, I mean, not people, but, you know, authorities or authoritarian regimes or authorities or institutions or authoritarian institutions try to impose things on us that divide us, you know. And so resistance is the word. And to be able to resist, we have to be able to speak freely. If we don't speak freely, we're going to forget how to speak, and we're going to forget how to think, and we're going to forget to think, like, entirely. So we have to keep speaking. So that's why I'm an advocate of free speech, and I'll keep on doing that. Okay.
100%. And you know, just one last instance on that, or one last comment on that. As Palestinians, you know, on social media, what we've seen is that our voices are actually a very big threat because we're being silenced by these social media platforms, and the posts are getting taken down, and Facebook is like actively trying to silence us. And so we're realizing it gives us even more energy and more power, because we're like, oh shit, like we actually have a lot of power just like on a phone, like just Muhammad and Muna al-Kurd taking videos of their neighborhood. This is the reality, just projecting it onto the world. It's such a threat that they got arrested for that, for disrupting public peace. What does that even mean? So I'm just, a proponent of free speech also is, it's like, it's crazy to me because this is the truth. They're just documenting their lives, and it's a threat. It's a threat. The truth is a threat, and we will keep spreading the truth no matter how many of us get arrested, to be honest.
Yeah, and it can be, I'm surprised. See, it's so true that they couldn't be taken down by fact checkers.
No.
So no, those fact checkers are anything but the truth. But that was just an ironic comment. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. You're a very, very busy young man. I'm glad we're close. So maybe one day we'll be able to physically meet, which is what we lack nowadays. Who knows? I wish you the best. And I'm always here if you have anything else new to report on or to talk about. This is open to you, at least to a Greek audience. Take care.
Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. I don't think I've ended. Have I ended the live on? Yeah, I've ended.